Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain John Vick, and I want to thank you for tuning in. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media by searching for @LSO Nebraska. That's @LSO Nebraska on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Welcome to the 902 Podcast. Today's episode is episode 5, talking about civil process. I've got Sheriff Terry Wagner with us. Good afternoon, Sheriff.
Good afternoon.
Chief Deputy Ben Houchin.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for being here.
You bet.
Joining us in the studio, we have Deputy Andy Miller.
Hello.
Andy, thank you so much for coming on. We're here to talk with you about civil process and all things to do with the unit you're assigned to right now. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I've been at the sheriff's office since I got hired in December of 1990, so that goes back a ways. I've been here in all but one of the divisions. I've served a majority of my time in the patrol division, and I did a stint in personnel and training, about 3.5 years in personnel and training, and I've been about 3.5 years in criminal investigations, and now here I am in the civil division. So I've been here just about 7 years, I think, seven plus, give or take.
So what was it about law enforcement that drew you to work in this field?
Well, interesting story. I was in college and looking for a major, and there was criminal justice after a introductory course here at the university, and it was kind of fascinating. That particular professor, who shall not be named, made it sound really cool. Not that it's not cool, but he had a way of embellishing things, I think, that got stars in a lot of students' eyes. And so here I was after graduation, and thought, what are you going to do?
We'll have to talk off air. I could use him in the recruiting side of things.
Yeah.
Or her.
I don't know if he's still there.
Okay. All right.
But there I was. So I applied first with the Lincoln Police Department, primarily because, as you've probably heard before, a lot of people just aren't aware of the sheriff's office and what we're here for and what we do, and especially younger folks like that, like me at the time. It was just I knew sheriff's deputies existed, but it wasn't on your radar. You know, the police department has and had a higher profile, I think, in the media at that time.
So did you just stumble across LSO then by accident?
Yeah,
or?
No, a friend of mine, he was connected to somebody who was aware of the goings-on about the office, and he called me up and said, "Did you know that they're hiring for deputy sheriff?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I didn't actually." So looked into that, and here I am, 30-some-odd years later.
We're glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
You mentioned there are a lot of things about the sheriff's office that people don't know about, and I think the unit that you work in is probably one of them. So what do you do here?
What do I do? Well, so a lot of people probably are familiar with, there's two types of courts. There's a criminal court and the civil court. So civil law and criminal law. Criminal law is what everybody is watching the cop shows on TV about, crimes against persons and property, and the state is the victim. Well, civil law is where people are, entities might sue one another, or monetary losses involved, things like that. And so all this has to do with papers coming from the court, papers that need to be served to individuals named in these lawsuits and these actions. And there are a number of us, 3 at the moment, who that's all we do. We receive the papers and we do our research, and we go out and try to find these people and get them legal service so that they're notified of the proceedings and they can go from there.
So, Sheriff, it goes back a little bit to what you talked about in one of our previous episodes about being the enforcement arm of the courts, and doing things that even medieval sheriffs did centuries ago.
Yeah, in Robin Hood's day, they were known for more so than even we are for collecting taxes, for serving writs and, those kinds of things, executing the orders of the king.
Mm-hmm.
And, the law enforcement functions really didn't come about until the office of sheriff came to the U.S.
So almost one of the original duties of the sheriff, as it were.
Correct.
Okay.
The Reeve of the Shire.
The Reeve of the Shire.
Shire Reeve.
It's a throwback to episode 0.
If
Anybody wants to go back and do some homework. So, well, talk to us a little bit about your unit. Who else works with you, or do you do that by yourself?
No. I'm glad I have others to carry the load because it's substantial. No, we're supposed to be a division of 4 deputies, and just like all the other divisions, we're short. Our division has not been spared any of the woes that law enforcement's experiencing at the moment, and so there are 3 of us doing the work of 3 deputies, and then we have a sergeant, Sergeant Shandera, and we have Captain Scriven, so it's Deputy Casares, myself, and Deputy Goodhart at the moment.
And short one, because usually we have 4 districts.
Usually have 4, so we are trying to, we're making do, and we get some help from other divisions here, and again, like this summer when one of the school resource officers will be out of school, we will get some help from one of them. That'll be much appreciated.
But like you were talking, so amongst the group of you, Sheriff, do you remember what the stat was for the kind of the overall number?
Right at about 15,000 papers that we receive every year.
Okay, so what are some of those? What are some of those papers? What are the various kinds that you see come across your desk?
Summonses are one of the main types of papers that we get, and a summons is kind of a catch-all. It's the first step in many court proceedings. I've never had anybody run the numbers for me, but I would venture to guess that summonses from the county attorney regarding child support are probably between 20 and 30% of all our papers, I would imagine. It's got to be pretty high.
So if I receive a summons, if you knock on my door and say, "You've been served,"
served.
Do you really say that?
No, it's funny. Some folks are challenge me on that, and they're like, "Aren't you supposed to say you've been served?"
The magic words.
If it makes you feel better, I will gladly utter those words. But
so you serve me with a summons. What is that telling me to do?
It's telling you that you have 30 days to respond to the parties in the suit. And I always tell people, I can't tell you what that means because I'm not an attorney, and we're very big about not giving legal advice because that's just not something we do. But they don't have to do anything. They don't have to respond in 30 days, and if they don't, there may be a judgment that the party bringing the suit may receive. So they may be ordered to pay the child support that has been requested, and a lot of people just do that. They just accept the responsibility and just let the court follow that procedure. So,
what people don't realize is that anybody can sue anybody for anything at any time, as long as they want to pay the filing fees.
Yeah.
That really is the only determining factor. So if I file a suit against Andy Miller and say you owe me $10,000, if you don't respond to that, then the court will enter judgment on my behalf against you for $10,000, regardless of whether or not there's any evidence to support that.
Right.
But if you just ignore it and don't respond, then the person bringing suit is awarded whatever they asked for.
right. Similar with like small claims court, which is not really a summons; it's a notice of a hearing. But they don't have to show up. But if they don't, they may be awarded the damages that whomever is seeking.
How does that differ to a subpoena?
Subpoenas are requiring someone to appear in a case, whether mainly criminal subpoenas that we serve, but every now and then you get a civil subpoena for maybe, say, a divorce trial hearing. Somebody needs to show up. If they don't show up for those hearings, they could be held in contempt of court. And that's essentially a subpoena, is requiring somebody to appear to testify on behalf of either the state or on behalf of the defense as a witness in the case. So.
Perfect. We don't do this for free, though.
No, we have to recoup our costs and stay solvent, if you will, I guess. I don't know. It's fees that we charge. There's mileage, of course, because we have to keep track of all our mileage. And there are different fees for the paper service for different types of papers, whether they were filed in state and were requested to be served within the city limits, or in the state outside of the city limits, or papers that come from out of state. So they're a little bit more expensive if they're out of state, out of city. So,
well, those service fees are actually listed on our website. If people are interested, they can look them up, lancaster.ne.gov/sheriff. Sheriff, how often are those fees visited? Do you set those fees? Where does that come from?
No, those fees come from the Nebraska legislature. And, gosh, we have tried for years to increase the fees because it just doesn't cover our cost. And we try to quantify for the legislature how much it costs us to serve a paper. We really have the advantage of the economy of scale with the number of papers that we serve. But you get to a smaller county, and it may only serve 150 papers a year, and they have to make a special trip for each one, every one of those papers. It's a lot more expensive there than it is here for that paper service. Mm-hmm. So we've had made attempts over the years to increase the fees for process service and for some of the other unfunded mandates that the legislature has put upon us. Handgun permits for one, title inspections is another. Not to take away from the civil division, but they're tasks that we were given by the legislature with a fee, and then it never ever goes up. So we've been doing handgun permits now for 30 years. The fee was $5 when it started. Fee's $5 right now. Same way with title inspections. That was back in about '87 when that law went into effect. Fee was $10 then. Guess what? $10 now.
Yeah, and our civilian staff, we've got a civilian staff of 4 civil specialists. That's a huge part of their day at the windows at the desk is people coming in and applying for handgun purchase permits. And it takes time, and they're great about, real knowledgeable about how to get that stuff done efficiently, but it would be nice to have a raise in fees after 30 years.
So hypothetically, if I'm out for a jog and Ben's dog decides to bite me, so I want to sue Ben because I probably have a hospital bill or something.
And why would Ben's dog bite you?
Well, I've been known to.
He's called Pork Chop. Remember?
I know that's right. That's
every dog loves him.
It's happened. It's happened.
They can sense your fear.
That must be.
Well, if John's around, you're not the one going to get bit. That's a good
exactly.
thing.
You don't have to outrun the dog. You just have to outrun John.
There you go.
So if I get bit by Ben's dog and I want to sue Ben, and I'm gonna serve him with whatever process is involved in that. How long does it take?
Well,
how does that work?
Well, you would. I think I've never sued anybody, so I've had to go through the experience. But clerk of
how long does it take to get them served? How about that? Served,
yeah. Well, there are each type of paper has different time limits on it. So if it were, if it's a summons, like you're suing him, 20 days, I believe is that. So, and we try to get 3 attempts in, and we do a little bit of research, try to get a phone number and give you a call if you're not responding to the cards we leave on your door. And, we'll go wherever, meet you wherever, and just know that if you receive one of these orange cards on your door, we're not judging you. We have a statutory obligation to get this paper to you. So.
Sure.
And do you ever have people they're in there and they're just not answering? And what do you do about that?
There's not much you can do. We will maybe see if you can find an employer, and visit them at work, or at least tell them, hey, you wouldn't want us to come and embarrass you at work now, would you?
So you don't try them at work the first time?
No, not at first, unless we don't. Depending on the nature of the paper, if there's something, for instance, a protection order, and the petitioner, the one filing the protection order, doesn't have an idea where this person is living, but they do know where they work, then we'll obviously go there because we want to make sure we get protection order served as quickly as possible. But for the most part, we try not to bug people at work if we don't have to.
So what you're talking about is serving someone in person.
Correct.
Personal service, we would call that.
Yes.
What other ways are you allowed to serve papers in?
So the three essential types of service are personal, that's giving it to the person named; residential, leaving it at their residence with somebody who, and this is important, that the other person has to actually live at that residence. And then there's posting or taping it to the front door. So there are certain types of papers where a court has ordered what's called constructive service, and that means that we're able to, after attempting the other types of service, if we're unsuccessful, then we can leave it posting at their door. They're also supposed to send certified mail, but that's up to the person doing filing the actual suit. So
we'll be right back.
If you want a challenging career, a career where you can make a difference in your life, your family's life, and the lives of those in your community, come and join the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. To learn more or to apply, visit us online at www.joinlso.com.
We're going to get into a topic next that I know a lot of people are interested in and have a lot of questions about, because we get questions about them. I'll stress, too, for all of our listeners that we certainly provide some guidance. We'll talk about some guidance on the podcast today. Some of that guidance is also on our website at lancaster.ne.gov/sheriff. But I don't want people to confuse that with legal advice. That's something that we can't provide, and that's something that they should seek counsel from an attorney or other legal professional for. So evictions are something that we deal with on a somewhat regular basis. So how does that work?
Well, the evictions that we deal with, it's a three-step process. So a landlord might want to get somebody out for having not paid rent for a number of months. And so the first step is to let them know, and they call that a notice to quit. Doesn't have to be served by the sheriff. It can be, if I think some landlords think it adds a little bit of weight to it, if there's the sheriff's stamp on the bottom of it, and it may give it a little bit more air of officialness, if you will. So it's not an official court paper, though, so they need to provide us with that paper. We can't tell them what it has to say, but we go out, and there's no time limit on that. We'll just get it done as quickly as possible. So that's the first step. Gives them notice that they're to vacate the premises.
And then,
well, if they don't, sometimes that's as far as it goes, and the tenants will voluntarily leave at that point, and we never hear from the landlord after that. But
if I pack my stuff and move out, then it's kind of done.
Yep.
Okay.
No harm, no foul.
But if I don't?
But if you don't, then the landlord or the owner is required to go to court, and that's where the suit starts, and they need to file a summons. It's another example of a summons. It's called summons restitution of premises or summons forcible entry. I think the two are interchangeable, but it essentially lists the court date that they're to show up for the hearing. And again, they're not required to attend by law like a subpoena, but if they don't, the likelihood that the landlord is going to get the property back is pretty much 100%. So,
okay, so that's actually then a hearing where a judge would decide
right
whether or not that eviction can move forward.
Right, and we've seen sort of something different has kind of come to fruition after the pandemic. I think there were a lot of people who were concerned that when people were losing their incomes, and I can't tell you the specifics of what happened on the federal level with regard to halting evictions, but I know locally there was a group of law students that decided they were wanting to volunteer and help represent people who were in eviction hearings, and I think that's still going on. I don't know, but they get their free legal help that way. And
sure,
I think it has. It's given some folks some ways to extend their time in the property and reversed some of these processes, but sometimes it's just delayed it. So, but at least they have some representation there.
So that can go either way.
Yep.
Obviously, but there's a chance that the judge would side on the side of the landlord, and then what's the next step after that?
So after that, then the plaintiff would request that the writ be issued, and it's a writ of restitution. So it restores the property to the owner, and we go ahead and serve that. Try to serve it personally, but it's one of those papers that can be posted on the front door.
Okay. So whether it's served personally or posted on the front door, are you kicking me out of my house that day?
Not that day. It's our policy that we give 72 hours, give you time to gather your things and make arrangements to get out. Part of that is to benefit the landlord. Some landlords would probably rather us do it immediately,
sure,
depending on the nature of the relationship between the landlord and the tenant. But I think on balance, it's a better practice because it allows people to get their stuff out of there, because then the landlord, based on rules set forth in the Landlord-Tenant Act, are required to store certain items of a certain value for a certain amount of time. And that can be a hassle, I think, for landlords as well. So the 72 hours gives them some time to get out.
So Sheriff, that's a policy decision on our end, being able to give people that extra time. I mean, we could act on that fairly quickly. What's your thought on allowing people that extra time?
I think what's fair, and obviously the deputies that serve the papers try to explain to the respondent they need to leave. They've got 3 days. That's a fair amount of time for them to pack up their stuff and find a place to put it. And I think most landlords will say, okay, this has been going on for a while. 3 days is an acceptable period of time to let these folks get out. And so it seems to fit everybody's needs at the time.
Okay.
So that's kind of how that was landed upon.
So what actually happens then, Andy, when the sheriff's office goes? I mean, we typically don't tell people when we're coming for officer safety purposes.
Right. I mean, when we serve the writ, whether it's posting it on the door or handing it to them in person, we'll give them a little notice that actually has the word eviction. So I think sometimes people are in denial, and having a document that's in sort of legalese, maybe not everybody is going to grasp the seriousness of it or actually maybe even understand. But if they receive a big orange little tag attached to the paper that says eviction, date and time, and that's what we give them, and it says we'll be here then or after. So that's basically the time that they would need to be gone by. You never know. I mean, every now and then you get somebody who, for whatever reason, was unable to get out in 72 hours or more. I mean, sometimes if it goes over the weekend and holidays and things like that, then they may have as much as 4 or 5 days, just depending on the calendar. But for whatever reason, every now and then, some folks, and part of it is too, you're dealing with people who are living in diminished circumstances and may have jobs that they can't really work around, and maybe they work all weekend, if it's something like that, and they just can't get it together. But we'll come back, and if they're gone, we just make sure we have a representative of the landlord present, whether it's the landlord themselves or a property manager, and they go ahead and change the locks. And if people are still moving out, it's up to the landlord.
Yeah.
They can. We make sure everybody steps away from the house and is actually removed from the house or the apartment or the mobile home, and then they can negotiate with the representative or the landlord to say, hey, how much time, will you give us more time? And it's up to the landlord. They don't have to. But a lot of times they'll say, come back tomorrow. That gives them this sort of break from the property, and then we post a no trespassing sign that, you have been evicted. If anybody's back here without permission from the landlord, they could be cited for trespassing. So
sure,
it just gives a break for everybody.
And having been with you on some of these, a lot of them go very smooth because there's either no one there and they're gone, or you make contact and people get it, right. That they've had their day in court or at least their opportunity, and they decide to move on. It's not one of the funnest parts of our job.
No,
certainly.
We get no joy out of it.
No, nobody likes kicking anyone out of their house. But it can be, Ben, we talked about this before we started recording, it can be a little bit dangerous at times too. That's probably one of the more exposed times for some of our deputies, because we're going into somebody's house potentially to remove them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of the worst situations we've gone into is when you're going to take somebody's house or you're going to tow their car for 30 days. People really do not like that part of it. And, when it comes to apartments is one thing, but if it's a family house that they've been living in for years and years and years, losing that can be devastating to them. So, it can turn dangerous and bad real quick.
Yep, it certainly can. A lot of these things are emotional. I mean, that's why the courts are even involved in deciding them in the first place. Another emotional type of process would be protection orders. And
very similar.
Yes.
In a certain way, right.
So what types of protection orders do you see in the civil unit?
So there are three types of protection orders that when protection orders first came into being, it was for intimate partners, domestic violence protection orders. So husbands, wives, girlfriends, girlfriend, boyfriend, people cohabitating in intimate partners. So it's kind of evolved over the years. They've instituted another form called harassment protection orders, which don't have as many behaviors that are prohibited, but very similar. And then sexual assault protection orders as well, where whatever instance led to the seeking of the protection order, it revolved around a sexual assault. So those are the three types of protection orders that we serve.
But like with an eviction, there are some protection orders that a court can order someone be excluded from a residence.
Correct, right. The domestic violence protection orders, every now and then, it's hard to say because sometimes they've already split, but a lot of times not. It could be where there has been an incident of domestic violence. The person responsible may have ended up in jail and may still be in jail, but sometimes they're already bonded out. And the partner has decided to seek the help of the courts with a protection order, and that protection order has excluded the offender who's not had their day in court yet, but they have received a charge, and it requires them to be removed and excluded from the residence. It can also bar them from showing up at the petitioner's place of work or maybe a school where the kids go, that sort of thing. So yeah, sometimes we do have to serve the order to the person and they're required to leave at that time. So you can imagine how that goes over sometimes.
Well, we've got a few more minutes here, and we'll talk about just a couple other types of civil process that you deal with. One that we get questions about for maybe obvious reasons is an execution. How many executions have you been involved in, Andy?
Well, not too many, really. Although Sergeant Shandera, she is the one who takes care of the executions, but we go out and actually try to contact those folks if she's like we've been shorthanded in our civilian staff until just the last couple of weeks, and so she's been kind of desk bound and isn't able to go out and make contact. But we'll go out and try to make contact with these folks. And
so for people that don't know, that are listening at home, are we executing people?
We're not executing anyone.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
So, an execution is where there has been a lawsuit, there's been a court case, and the judge has ordered in favor of the plaintiff, and so they've sought these monetary damages in whatever form, and now the judge is ordering us to go. It hasn't been satisfied. The judgment has not been satisfied. It hasn't been paid, and the judge is ordering us to go and try to recoup the funds, whether or not this person can cut a check, or whether it gets to another stage where we're required to maybe go, if it's a business, for instance, we could go in what they call a till tap, where we actually take money from the business's cash register. It happens every now and then.
Only with an order of the court.
Right. Only with an order of court. So
yeah. A couple other ones that we get questions about: distress warrants.
Yeah, distress. I guess it's a tax that has not been paid. It's personal property taxes, whether it's related to running a business or owning a mobile home. Those come when they're delinquent. Every November, one of our civilian specialists, Margie, she gets notified of a big old list of, and then so it's her job to then track them down, give them a phone call, send them letters and that kind of thing, and say, hey, you owe us this, you owe the county for this. And a lot of times it'll be, and it's a warrant. Nobody's going to be arrested, but it's just called a distress warrant. So,
Sure.
And there may be warrants for multiple years. You could have folks who haven't paid those taxes for 2023, 2022, and maybe even further back. So every now and then we'll go out and deputies will make notification if she's not getting any response on the phone or in the mail. So.
Okay, so on this last one, Sheriff, a sheriff sale, and I'm picturing you on the courthouse steps with the hear ye, and talking really fast. A sheriff sale.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever done a sheriff sale?
I have not.
So, what do we do for a sheriff sale, Andy?
Well, we have to post notice for 30 days in the Lincoln Journal-Star. That's the only notice that we put out there, but. In a lot of times it's, say, an eviction where a mobile home in maybe one of the many mobile home parks here is owned by the person who lives in it, but it sits on the park land, and it's the lot rent that they've fallen behind on, say, and then we put a lien on it, say after we've served the eviction there, and then we have to notify the public for 30 days that it's going to be sold at sheriff's sale, and then people show up, buy it. Generally, a lot of times if it's a mobile home in one of the parks, it's representative of the mobile home park that comes in and buys it because they want to either demolish it or renovate it and resell it or re-rent it. So
probably another age-old process, Sheriff. I'm guessing back to the olden times.
Old days. Yes.
But again, it's just the enforcement arm of the courts and a process that takes place. Well, really appreciate you being here to talk with us about the civil process, everything that you do in the civil unit. Today is also Pi Day, Sheriff.
Yes, I'm aware.
It's not March 14th.
No,
but it's
but Pi Day comes around here every Friday.
Oh, that Pi Day.
But where did Pi Day come from, Sheriff?
Well, when Sheriff Ron Tusing became sheriff in 1987, he and Chief Deputy Cassidy would don their uniforms, grab a marked patrol unit, go out in the county, and generally would try to have pie at one of the local eateries in any of the small towns. And so at that time, Panama had the Panama Cafe, and many of the small towns had cafes or small restaurants, and a lot of them served great homemade pies. And so the funny thing was, Ron Tusing and Tom Castro were both pretty much health nuts. They rode bicycles a lot, they ran a lot, and this was kind of a little throwback to being not healthy, eating homemade pie. So it became known as Pie Day, and the Journal-Star ran an article about it after Tusing took office, that they went out for Pie Day every Friday. And it's just, I haven't had pie in years.
I don't either.
No?
No.
But it's just that name has carried on, and that's what we do every Friday afternoon. We try to get out of the office, go out. Last week we served a search warrant in the northern part of the county and said, where's that at? I'm not familiar with that area. And so we drove up there where that had taken place, and you just, kind of refamiliarize yourself with the geography of the county as it's changing constantly.
Sure. Where'd you end up today, Ben?
Well, we didn't go out very far because we were going to do this today. So we stayed in town and ate there in town. So, but usually if we have a few more hours, we go out and we hit Denton, we hit Howland, we hit Firth and Waverly and the Ding, and
Raymond, yeah,
Romano's and all those places. So we kind of try to do a rotation on those and get out. But as we were talking, there's not as many places anymore out there to choose from out in the county.
Merle's in Emerald used to be a nice favorite spot on Fridays for a great chicken fried steak, and they've closed down. And Panama Cafe always had great food, and they've closed down, years ago. And Yeah, we've had some really good restaurants in the county that have shut down. Mama's Tita's in Bennett was another good example of great food, and it just closed down. And so, yeah, there are lots of great places to eat, and we just try to find out where they're at, say hi to the people running them, and let them know we know they're there, and then explore that part of the county.
And every now and then you hear them call out on something that is they've observed, or their other deputies are going out on.
You're saying real live police
real
work.
cop work.
Yeah, real cop work, yeah.
We like to call that Sheriffin.
Yeah, Sheriffin.
Sheriffin.
Well, ever since he's had his surgery, we try not to do any sheriffing for a little while. We got to get him healed up before we go do that stuff.
Well, that's all the time that we've got for the 902 podcast today. I want to thank Deputy Andy Miller for joining us and talking about the civil unit. Thanks, Andy, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Andy.
I'm Captain John Vick. We want to just thank everybody for listening today. Again, we want this podcast to give you an inside look at topics and public safety issues within Lancaster County, coming to you straight from the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. Be sure to subscribe for new episodes. And just remember, you can also follow us across social media by searching for @LSO Nebraska. That's @LSO Nebraska. And we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for listening.